Mornings in Newton, an upscale suburb of Boston, had become both precious and frantic for me. My name is Emily Hartwell, and I had built my career as a marketing manager for nearly 10 years before giving birth to my daughter, Olivia. Returning to work when she was only 3 months old was harder than I ever imagined. Each morning began with her soft cheeks illuminated by the sun through the nursery window. "Good morning, Olivia," I whispered as I lifted her tiny body from the crib, cherishing those quiet moments before the day carried me away. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, where my husband Michael was already in his suit, adjusting his tie while watching the news. He glanced at his watch. His voice clipped as he asked, "You're up early today? How's Olivia?" There was a coolness in his tone that I kept convincing myself was only work stress. His mother, Margaret, soon arrived as she always did before 7:30 a.m. She was a retired nurse and had offered to care for Olivia while I worked. Hiring a sitter was an option, but her presence not only eased our finances, but gave me peace of mind, at least on the surface. She greeted me with her warm smile, her silver hair neatly pinned back. When she picked up Olivia, she handled her with the effortless skill of someone who had once soothed countless infants. Still, I felt an odd undercurrent of discomfort, something I couldn't put into words. I brushed it aside and hurried off to work, leaving my daughter in her grandmother's arms. But each evening, I returned something gnawed at me. Olivia seemed exhausted, her once bright eyes dulled, as if she had weathered storms in my absence. Margaret would reassure me that she had simply been fussy, though her vague tone always left me unsettled. And then there was Michael. Once a man who had loved children and promised he would be a devoted father now, he seemed easily irritated by our daughter's crying. One morning, when Olivia burst into desperate sobs as I lifted her from her crib, Michael stormed upstairs and snapped, "Every single morning this noise is unbearable. Isn't it because of the way you're raising her? Other babies don't cry like this." His words cut me deeper than he realized. I fought back tears, wondering if I was truly failing as a mother. Yet, I began noticing something strange. Olivia cried most intensely in the mornings, and her little body stiffened when Michael approached. Evenings, too, carried the same tension. But when it was just me and her, she calmed her tiny hands, clutching my finger, as if it were her lifeline. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence, but the uneasiness grew. The turning point came during a visit to our pediatrician, Dr. Johnson. I held Olivia as he prepared his stethoscope, and when Michael arrived late and reached to hold her, everything shifted. My daughter screamed with such terror that even the seasoned doctor froze. Her fists clenched, her body went rigid, her cries full of raw fear. When Margaret entered moments later, Olivia's demeanor changed instantly. She relaxed, smiled even as if she had been delivered into safety. The contrast was undeniable. Dr. Johnson asked to speak with me privately. With grave eyes, he explained, "This is what we call a selective fear response. Even at this age, babies instinctively know who is safe and who is not. Olivia is terrified of her father." His words sent a shiver through me. I thought of the crying fits, the exhaustion, the missing clothes Margaret said she had washed, the way Olivia looked relieved only in her grandmother's arms. "You must install hidden cameras," he urged. "Gather evidence. Do not handle this alone." I drove home with trembling hands, my heart racing. That evening, once Olivia was asleep, I installed small cameras in the living room hallway and dining area. My fingers shook as I placed them, but I knew I had to see what was happening when I wasn't there. The next day during lunch break at work, I checked the feed on my phone. What I saw confused me more. Margaret had taken Olivia to her own house. There, through the cameras, I saw a nursery prepared in secret, a crib, toys, baby clothes, even framed pictures of my daughter. My unease deepened. Why would she hide this from me? That afternoon, I drove to her house, my chest tight with dread. I peered through the window before knocking and saw her rocking Olivia, singing softly. My baby's face finally at peace. Inside, however, was something I never expected, not only the hidden nursery, but photographs of Michael with another woman. Margaret looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Sit down, Emily. It's time you know the truth." I sat down on Margaret's sofa, my eyes darting between the hidden nursery and the photograph of Michael with a woman I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Michael's arm was draped around her shoulders, his smile warm and unguarded, completely different from the detached man who came home late each night. Margaret placed a tablet on the coffee table and looked at me with quiet resignation. "There's something more serious than the affair," she said. "You need to see this." On the screen was footage from her own hidden cameras, recorded in our house during the mornings I was already at work. My breath caught as I watched Michael lean over Olivia's crib. She began whimpering, and instantly his face twisted into something unrecognizable. "Shut up," he hissed, shaking the crib roughly. Olivia froze, her tiny body stiff with terror, the same reaction I had seen in the mornings. "See that? Now you're quiet," he muttered with a cruel smile. I clapped my hand over my mouth, tears spilling, as Margaret pressed play on another clip. In this one, Michael's voice was low and mocking as he held his phone to his ear. "Yeah, Sarah, I'll see you tonight. Don't worry about the baby. I'll handle it. She's a nuisance anyway." My stomach twisted at his tone, dismissive, cold, as if our daughter was nothing more than an inconvenience. Clip after clip played, each worse than the last, Michael cursing at Olivia, threatening her to stop crying, and once even slapping the side of the crib so hard she shrank back too shocked to cry. The sound of his laugh after silencing her with fear made my skin crawl. Margaret's voice trembled as she said, "I noticed the change in her cries 2 weeks ago. I knew what I was hearing. This wasn't ordinary fussiness. I've seen abused babies before." That's when I started recording. I was afraid to tell you directly because Michael threatened me. He said if I interfered, he'd keep you from Olivia forever. She wiped her eyes, then opened a box from the closet. Inside were Olivia's soiled baby clothes, some torn, some with stains she had kept instead of washing. Next to them was a notebook, each page documenting Michael's behavior dates and times. "I needed proof," she whispered. I felt my whole world tilt. The man I had trusted, the father I had thought would love our child, had been tormenting her behind my back. The affair, the long work trips, the irritation, it all made sense now. He wasn't just absent, he was dangerous. And Margaret, the woman I had sometimes felt wary of, had been the only one standing between Olivia and something far worse. My voice shook as I asked, "What do we do?" Margaret's eyes hardened with determination. "We go to the police and a lawyer. We have the evidence. But we must act quickly before he realizes he's being watched." That evening, clutching the videos and Margaret's meticulous notes, I sat in a lawyer's office. The weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me, but every time I pictured Olivia's terrified eyes, I knew I couldn't hesitate. The lawyer reviewed the material with a grim expression. "This is enough to build a strong case," he said. "But you need the police involved immediately to protect your daughter." The next stop was the police station. Detective Chief Detroit, a veteran in child abuse cases, sat across from me as I replayed the recordings. He scribbled notes, his face tight with anger. "These videos are damning. The audio is clear, the behavior unmistakable. This will hold up in court," he assured me. Margaret gave her statement explaining how she had first noticed the signs of abuse, her background as a nurse giving her credibility. "Why didn't you report it earlier?" the detective asked. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. He threatened to take the baby away forever. But I couldn't let this continue. That's why I kept collecting evidence. By the time we left, an arrest warrant was already in motion. Detective Detroit promised me that Michael would be taken into custody that very night. Margaret and I returned to her house, where Olivia slept peacefully in the carefully prepared nursery. I sat beside her crib, stroking her tiny hand, my heart torn between grief and relief. This wasn't how I had imagined family life would be, but at least now she was safe. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a call from the detective. "It's done," he said simply. Through the live feed from my hidden cameras, I watched police officers confront Michael as he walked into our living room. Confusion flashed across his face, quickly replaced by rage. "You have no evidence," he shouted. "This is ridiculous." But the detective's calm reply echoed through the speakers. "We have more than enough. You're under arrest for child abuse. You have the right to remain silent." I watched as Michael was handcuffed, his anger spilling into curses, his once polished image crumbling before my eyes. In that moment, grief surged through me. I had loved this man. I had built a life with him, but the man I thought I knew had never truly existed. What was left now was only betrayal and the responsibility of protecting my daughter from the father who had broken us both. The next morning, news of Michael's arrest spread quickly. His investment firm wasted no time in firing him. In his line of work, trust and reputation were everything, and a child abuse charge was a career-ending scandal. I should have felt vindicated, but instead I sat at Margaret's kitchen table, staring at my untouched coffee knob. The man I had once loved was gone, replaced in my mind by the cruel figure from the recordings. Even though I had been the one to hand over the evidence, a part of me still grieved as though he had died. The trial came 3 months later. I stood in the courthouse hallway, Olivia in Margaret's arms, while my lawyer assured me we had an airtight case. The prosecutor presented the recordings, Margaret's detailed notes, and testimony from Dr. Johnson, who explained Olivia's fear responses in clear professional terms. This baby had already learned to freeze and stiffen in terror at her father's presence, he told the jury. The words made me want to weep. My daughter, barely 3 months old, had known fear so deep it shaped her body's instinctive reactions. Michael's lawyer tried to argue that the videos were misleading, that his outbursts were just frustrated parenting, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for only a short time before returning with a guilty verdict. The judge's voice was steady as he handed down probation, a restraining order forbidding Michael from ever approaching me or Olivia, and the requirement that child support payments would be determined separately in civil court. Michael's shoulders slumped as the reality settled on him. He had lost everything: his career, his family, and even the affair partner he had betrayed me with. I later heard Sarah had abandoned him, horrified by the details that emerged. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse into the cold afternoon air, holding Olivia against my chest. Margaret wrapped her arm around me. "It's finished now," she whispered, but I knew it wasn't truly finished. Abuse leaves scars, and Olivia's reactions, her stiffened body, her fearful eyes, were not going to vanish overnight. The months that followed were a slow climb toward healing. I moved in with Margaret, too afraid to return to the house I had once shared with Michael. The hidden nursery she had built became Olivia's sanctuary. At first, my daughter still cried whenever an unfamiliar man entered the room. Her tiny fists clenched, her breathing shallow. But gentle pediatricians and therapists began working with her, and gradually her responses softened. She learned to trust again, especially when she was surrounded by warmth and safety. I tried to rebuild my own life as well. Returning to work was no longer about climbing the career ladder. It was about creating stability for Olivia. My colleagues offered support, and slowly I learned how to juggle responsibilities without the constant fear that had shadowed me. Yet there were nights when I lay awake, replaying Michael's words in my head, hearing his cruel voice telling Olivia she was a nuisance. The betrayal wasn't just that he had hurt our daughter, it was that he had destroyed the family I thought we were building. Margaret became my anchor. The woman I had once regarded with unease turned out to be my greatest ally. She never once blamed me, though I often blamed myself. "Emily, you are a good mother," she told me often. "Michael's cruelty is his alone. Don't let it take root in you." Her quiet strength gave me hope that Olivia would grow up surrounded by real love, the kind that protects and nurtures rather than harms. One crisp autumn afternoon, 6 months after the trial, we took Olivia to the park. The leaves were turning gold, and the air smelled faintly of wood smoke. Olivia sat in her stroller, waving her small hands with delight as she watched children play nearby. Margaret and I sat on a bench exhausted but content, watching her discover the world without fear. For the first time in months, I felt a lightness in my chest. "Thank you," I whispered to Margaret. "If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened." She shook her head, her eyes soft. "This is what family is, Emily. It's not about blood, not even about marriage. It's about protecting the ones you love no matter what." I felt tears sting my eyes. She was right. Family wasn't about titles or legal bonds. It was about the choices we made to care for each other, even when everything else fell apart. As the sun began to set, Olivia looked up from her stroller and said her first clear words. "Mama, Grandma." My breath caught. Margaret and I looked at each other, both smiling through tears. Those simple words carried a weight far greater than their sound. They were a declaration of love, of trust, of the new family we had become. In that golden moment, watching my daughter smile without fear, I knew we had survived the worst. And though the road ahead would not be easy, we would walk it together, 3 women bound not by blood or obligation, but by the courage to protect each other and the love that made us whole again. Life after Michael's trial was quieter, but silence didn't mean the wounds were gone. Some mornings I woke up expecting to hear his footsteps, expecting his voice dripping with irritation at Olivia's cries. Then I would roll over and see my daughter's peaceful sleeping face, or hear Margaret softly humming in the kitchen, and remind myself that he was gone, barred from our lives forever. The restraining order was more than just paper. It was a wall of protection that allowed us to finally breathe again. Olivia was growing stronger every day. The stiff, fearful reactions faded, gradually replaced by bubbling laughter and playful squeals that filled Margaret's home with new life. Therapy sessions with child specialists helped her relearn what safety felt like. They said babies are resilient, and watching her cling to Margaret's fingers or laugh when I kissed her cheeks, I believed it. Still, the shadow of those early months lingered in me. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would replay the videos in my mind, the sound of Michael's cruel voice echoing until I shook myself awake. Healing wasn't linear, but every day I chose to step forward for Olivia. The community around us rallied in unexpected ways. Neighbors dropped off meals my colleagues covered for me when I needed time off, and even Dr. Johnson called to check on us. "You both did the hardest thing," he told me over the phone one evening. "You listened to the child who couldn't speak yet and believed her. That's what saved her." His words stayed with me. Financially, things were difficult at first. The civil court later ordered Michael to pay child support, though with his career ruined, the payments were minimal. But money was no longer my measure of stability. Margaret and I budgeted carefully, and I threw myself into projects at work, not for recognition, but for the steady paycheck that kept Olivia's world secure. What I had lost in partnership, I gained in independence and clarity. One afternoon, as I was folding tiny clothes in Margaret's living room, Olivia toddling around with her first wobbly steps, Margaret sat beside me and said quietly, "You know, I used to wonder if I failed as a mother." Michael became what he did. I thought perhaps it was my fault. She looked down, her voice breaking. But watching you fight for Olivia, I realized sometimes love isn't enough to stop someone from choosing cruelty. What matters is that we protect the next generation. I reached over and squeezed her hand. You didn't fail, Margaret. If anything, you saved us. You saw what I couldn't bear to see. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she nodded, comforted by words she needed to hear. For both of us, Michael's downfall was not just an ending, but a reckoning. We had to forgive ourselves for the things we hadn't known, the warnings we had ignored. Seasons shifted, and life began to feel normal again. Olivia's first birthday was celebrated in the same park where she had once spoken her first words. We decorated with balloons, baked cupcakes, and sang as she clapped her tiny hands with delight. It wasn't the grand party I once imagined I'd host with Michael, but it was something better. It was safe, filled with genuine love, surrounded by people who cared deeply for her. When Olivia smeared frosting across her face, and Margaret laughed until tears rolled down her cheeks, I realized this was the kind of memory I wanted my daughter to grow up with. Months later, as I tucked Olivia into bed after a long day, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes and whispered, "Mama loves me." My throat tightened because she was right. I did more fiercely than anything in this world. That love had carried me through betrayal, through fear, through nights of doubt and days of sorrow. And now, it was shaping her world into one where love meant safety, not pain. Looking back, I often wonder how easily the truth could have been buried if not for Margaret's vigilance, or Dr. Johnson's sharp eye, or Olivia's own desperate cries. Abuse hides in plain sight, cloaked in excuses and denial. But babies, even without words, tell us the truth with their bodies, their cries, their fear. And if we listen, if we act, we can change the course of their lives. Standing at the park one evening, watching Olivia chase bubbles with laughter spilling from her lips, I realized that our little family, just the three of us, was stronger than I had ever dreamed. Family, I learned, is not defined by blood or vows spoken at an altar. It is defined by the courage to protect, the choice to love unconditionally, and the determination to build safety out of brokenness. So if there is one lesson I carry from all of this, it is this. Sometimes the people we trust the most betray us in ways we never imagined. But sometimes the ones we least expect become our fiercest protectors. Love, real love, is not about appearances. It is about sacrifice, vigilance, and the quiet courage to say, "This ends here." And in the end, Olivia's smile, free of fear, was all the proof I needed that we had won. If this story moved you, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment below. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to light.